Sup, nerds? Welcome to the Drunk Bolter Podcast. Hey, oh, hey. There it is. Ooh. All right, again, that is Cumbia Mexican Banda by Julius H., a 70-year-old giving away their music for free on Pixabay. Shout out, Julius. All right, some technical difficulties, but now we're back. Wanted to keep that intro because I already popped open the beer can here, and also I actually did try to re-record it already and popped open a second beer can and then had the same issue. So now we're double fisting for the Emperor boys. And of course, there's no beer at double fist like the most tactical beer known to man, Michelob Ultra. Here's to you, Lord Regent. So anyway, guys, we're coming at you with a 1.5 podcast today. Not a true 2.0. You know, good old Imperial IP agent and I will be doing a second full-length, hopefully not 4 hours this time, hopefully maybe 1 hour podcast next week, covering the new detachments in the new Guard Codex. We're going to be covering the new Slanesh reveals, the new Emperor's Children reveals, and maybe we'll briefly touch on the new Eldar reveals, although we don't really care about them because Emperor's Children is coming. But anyway, guys, we're going to get right on into it. Today, we're just going to do a tactical review with the most tactical beer known to man of the first tournament of the year that me and part-time contributor Tomas Titanium Jimenez played in, the Gigabytes January RTT. All right, so the list. Let's talk about the list. I was using the Warpbane detachment. Of course, if you are a Grey Knights player and you are still using Teleport Strike Force, I am sorry to inform you that you are doing it wrong. The Teleport Strike Force detachment has been severely neutered with the most recent Balance Date Slate update, essentially making two of the most important stratagems, True Silver Armor and Prognosticated Arrival, less than half as good as they were before. True Silver Armor only applies to one activation now instead of all phase. For me, I was running Terminator Heavy Teleport Strike Force. It was really nice getting those big units of Terminators into cover and using True Silver Armor to have a -2 AP off them all phase to improve their survivability, especially because one of them reses. Now that it's only one activation, it's a lot less good against shooting armies. And then Prognosticated Arrival, the 3-inch deep strike, the 6-inch deep strike, unless you're playing against a real, non-competitive player, they're going to know how to screen out 6 inches. It's not that hard. So, given that, I think Warpbane is the only option we have available to us, and I think it's a pretty good option. I think it is a pretty good option. We've seen, lists with Max Dread Knights in Warpbane do good at LVO. I have never been too into the Max Dread Knight build. I've always leaned more into the infantry, but sprinkling of Dread Knights. That being said, I did use, mostly during the Teleport Strike Force days, 3 or even 4 Dread Knights at times in the list that I ended up being successful with. This one, I actually had a good turn performance with only 2 Grandmaster Nemesis Dread Knights. So only 2 Grandmaster Nemesis Dread Knights in my list, and Castellan Crows, my Warlord. Those are my only characters. I then had 2x5 Strike Squads with Incinerators. I've really enjoyed having 2 Strike Squads. The entirety of 10th so far, I've been playing with, up until this tournament and practicing for it, I've been playing with only 1 Strike Squad on my list. Having 2 is awesome because it allows you to keep that first one on home, sticky it, and then leave it there while your opponent, uses all his deep strikes and teleportation elsewhere so that you can, keep them there until the threat's gone. And you still are able, if they have to, even if they have to do their all game, you still get that second unit that can go around stickying objectives that you already control and allowing your more kill units to move off of them and kill further. So I've found that utility to be amazing. You also get to, if you want, use the 6-inch scout move on that second unit. So usually, you're just sticking home, you're not using the scout. This unlocks a little bit of scout play. It's just been great. And then I have 2 squads of 5 interceptors. Now these guys are my go-to action monkeys, or my go-to sacrificial pieces for being in different areas of the battlefield. They're awesome. They have great movement. They're great at containing. They love to contain, let me tell you. And yeah, they're just more scoring pieces. This list is 50 Grey Knight Space Marines. It's really, I feel like I'm playing 9th edition. It's freaking amazing. Then the meat of the list is, of course, 3 10 bricks of Purifiers. So these guys are my primary damage dealers in the list. The Grandmaster Nemesis Dread Knights are there to hunt, large units, like really, really large, really tough units if I run into them. But mostly they're just kind of bopping around, teleporting around, giving some supporting fire for these Purifiers. So I have one tin brick that's all melee and starts in the Land Raider. Now, if I'm able to position the Land Raider in a way that I think, after I see what the game's developing into, probably in turn one, if I think I'll be able to get that Land Raider charge out, I've been leaving them in and doing that Land Raider charge. But if I don't think that's possible, I go ahead and pop them out turn one, and then they just go ahead and do the uppy downy, and eventually they get that. They use Hallowed Beacon for a 6-inch deep strike off of another unit of Purifiers, then get a charge. But if I'm able to get that line up that Land Raider perfectly, then it saves that CP, and I still have the Land Raider's firing support. I know Land Raider's 240 points, but when you think about it, a Dread Knight right now is 210 points. So for 30 more points, you get like way, way, way better anti T12 tank shooting than the Dread Knight offers, and it's just kind of a chunk of something sturdy that gives you a little bit of fire support and a little bit of range threat against something that's tough. But so anyway, those 10 Purifiers with melee are starting the Land Raider. If they're staying in the Land Raider until they charge, depends on how the battle's progressing. And then I have 2 more Purifiers, 1 tin brick with 4 Incinerators. I'm always running this one with Crow. So Crow is dropping down with this unit. Hopefully, unless it's against all vehicle army, is split firing, rerolling all wounds. Bolters and Flamers this way, and Purifying Flame this way to try to take out 2 infantry squads and 1 shooting activation. Then potentially maybe they're the unit getting the Hallowed Beacon used on it, and then they're getting a charge. And even though they don't have all melee, they still have 18 melee attacks and Crow's attacks with death wounds, rerolling all hits and wounds in melee as well if you stack up that CP for a big punch, which is what I've been doing with attachments. It can be just as good because Crow's in there giving the devies as well. And I don't think the melee Purifiers really need him. I've seen a lot of stuff about running him with melee Purifiers. His primary buff is that he buffs the shooting of the Purifying Flame attack. He's cute in melee, right? Like, he's still getting into melee after leaving the Incinerators, but what it does is it lets you drop him down, do what he's there for, which is the maximum reroll all hits and wounds shooting attack, splitting fire, or just focusing down something that's really important. Then, even if you can't charge, whatever moves there is getting the best overwatch possible from Grey Knight's army from him. And then if he does get the charge in the game, you can still do the melee thing. When they start dying, if you've done that first overwatch, what I've been doing is I'm killing the Flamers off first so that by the time I get into combat, I still have the maximum amount of melee around him as possible. So he's kind of really, a 1 shooting activation phase plus 1 overwatch sacrificial piece alpha strike that does, I think he found his way into combat in every game except for the last one in this tournament. And then I won 1 tin brick of Purifiers with 4 side cannons. Now, these guys are mostly bopping around. They're my go-tos for setting up hallowed ground for the other Purifiers to use Hallowed Beacon for. And I'm running them with side cannons because the side cannons rerolling all wounds, wounding T12 vehicles on 5s instead of T12 vehicles on 6s, which is what the Incinerators do. So the side cannons, strength 8, they still wound T12 on 5s. And even they wound up to T14 on 5s. So giving them the full reroll wounds is good to strip, reliably maybe 5 wound or 6 wounds, and then, if it spikes, maybe 8 to 10 wounds off of a vehicle that's super tough. But I think on average I've probably been getting 5, because sometimes 4, sometimes 6 wounds off of a very tough vehicle, and that's we need as much vehicle chipping as we can get, and it's still good against infantry, especially against other Marines. It's damage too. So then we have 1 Land Raider. Now the Land Raider in my practice games did a lot better than it did in the tournament because I was not anticipating a rule about the terrain that we will get into when we start going into the individual matchups. But it did okay in this tournament. It did, help me kill the Silent King, which clutched that game for me. And then sometimes I honestly probably played too passively with it and left that out of the game too long. But moving on, that's my list, and we'll look at what happened in game 1. So in game 1, I was playing against Chaos Space Marines Creation of Bile's very strong new detachment, where the opponent, they roll 2 dice, or they can pick one if they're being lame, but usually they'll roll 2 dice and that goes off a table, and they can give +1 toughness or +1, strength in melee, or +2 movement, or +1 attack in melee. It's like a sheet of buffs that they roll for 2 off of, and they give that to all Chaos Space Marine infantry models in their army. So really nasty on stuff like Possessed, Chosen, all that good shit. We played Mission K. The primary mission was Scorched Earth, so just hold 1, hold 2 for 5 or 10 points, and then burning for 5 points in No Man's Land, and burning for 10 points in your opponent's deployment zone. The mission rule was Stalwarts. Deployment was Search and Destroy, so very close together. We both have a lot of melee in our list, so this was kind of like a, death trap from the start. And the terrain for the entire tournament was Layout 1. Now, we didn't catch this or I didn't. Yeah, my opponent didn't catch it either. I guess we didn't catch this at the beginning of this game. So my plan for layout 1 was to have my Land Raider parked here in the home L corner, able to penetrate and move through to threaten the center objective. Now I did this game 1, but then my opponent afterwards was like, "Oh, actually, the TO said that we weren't supposed to be able to move it through there." So I went and asked him, and he confirmed that the intent, even though the Land Raider could have fit through the visible terrain, the intent of this GW layout is that a vehicle that size cannot move through there. So that kind of decreased the utility I got of the Land Raider for the rest of the time. I don't think it swung this game too much, because if I couldn't have deployed it there, I would have just deployed it at the bottom of the L here and then done the same thing, essentially. Move it out here, then move it up to the center, instead of move it through the gap and then up to the center. So, stuff like that you hate to find out after the game, because, it just feels bad for the person that loses the game if the person winning has a misplay like that. But c'est la vie, and just FYI, Land Raiders cannot move through that gap in layout 1. All right, my opponent's list: Chaos Lord. He had a Chaos Lord with the Prime Test Subject. It's like a once per game Super Saiyan mode for the Chaos Lord. He had Cypher, got the Lone Op. Fabius Bile was leading a 10 brick of Chosen, so they were getting the double buffs. He had a Cultist mob, just a minimum 10 sized. He had 2 Legionnaires with las cannons, 1x5 Chosen, 1x5 Meniscus Claws, 2 squads of Maximum Possessed, and 2 War Dog Huntsmen. Now, he was using the 3 Rhinos in kind of a cool way. He was having, and I know this is like a meta list now, but in case you're not aware of the Chaos Space Marine meta, inside of these Rhinos, one of them had the 10 Chosen with Fabius, but then the other 2 had, one of them had the 1x5 Chosen and 1x5 Legionnaires, and one of them had the 1x5 Legionnaires and 1x5 Nemesis Claw. So he was like moving the Rhinos and then jumping one of the units out, but then keeping the other unit in the Rhino, and then the Rhino moved the next turn, and then they jumped out. So it's kind of like a cool little Russian nesting doll action kind of in there. And then let's talk about how the game went. So I did pull this game out by 2 points, 89-87. At the start of the game, I got some really good secondaries. I got Extended Battle Line, Secure No Man's Land. With the amount of chaff units I have, the Interceptors and the Strike Marines, early game action secondaries, I'm loving those. I'm getting those every time. I'm not having any problems, because I have 3 super expendable units, and then the 4th one that frees up later in the game once the home objective is secure. So got double 5 on that. He drew Recover Assets and Area Denial and decided that going in the center was not the best thing for him to do, because he was, afraid of my counter charges that would be able to jump on him and search and destroy. I had a lot of stuff lined up to get to that center if he went there first. Turn 2, everyone got 10 primary. We both on 1 and on home at least. He drew Assassinate and Cleanse, which he maxed both of. He was able to, assassinate my Grandmaster Nemesis Dread Knight, which I had stucken out onto that middle objective to try to bait him out there. And then he ended up getting assassinated, so it ended up working out for him that turn because he got points. But then he was baited out into the middle with a 10 brick of his Possessed. In my turn then, I, brought forward. I was actually able to walk Crow's unit out of my home L and be in range of those Possessed without moving. And then I also think I deep struck in the second Purifiers for a counter charge or something like that. Or no, that's when I brought the Land Raider through the gap, yeah. But again, if I had known that rule, instead of moving through the gap here, I would have already been moved out to the side under this middle terrain piece L. This piece right here. So I would have been here with the Land Raider, and I would have come here. He didn't really have any shooting that could have gotten me here anyway. Maybe one shot from a Huntsman. So I don't think it really ended up changing the game that much. And Crow's unit was here, and they moved out to here, and we were able to effectively neuter that Possessed unit and then get back on that objective with a good counterpunch. Generally, you don't want to jump in the middle first. I did put the Dread Knight out there, but in my list and the way I'm playing, the Dread Knights are the second tier of sacrificial units. And then the Purifiers are really, well, honestly, everything's a sacrificial unit. my thing's really all about trading and then hemming my opponent into their home objective. And even if they, don't have, even if they end the game with more models than me, hopefully I've got like multiple objectives stickied and just enough to keep him held back to win on the score. And that's kind of what ended up happening in this game. So he got the Assassinate, got the Cleanse. Then I nuked that, Possessed brick with Crow and with other resources, got that objective for Storm Hostile objective, and then I got Containment for Max. Again, I had a million scoring pieces, Interceptors here, Interceptors there, Uppy Downy, the second Strike Squad, whatever it takes, I'm getting Containment done. Going into turn 3, I had taken him off everything but his home objective, so he only got 5 points on the primary. Then he drew Cold the Horde and Bring It Down. And this was another misplay that happened, actually. I didn't realize in over a year of playing the game that Cold the Horde does not count the wounds of attached characters. And that's hilarious because it's literally on the fucking card. It says, do not count attached characters. At any rate, I gave him Cold the Horde on a 10-man squad with Castellan Crow. So you could say I cheated by moving the Land Raider, but here's 5 points that if we had known the rules about Cold the Horde, he wouldn't have gotten. It all kind of comes out in the wash. Then he got Bring It Down. He must have killed the other Dread Knight because that's the only thing that would be worth 2 wins. So we're in top of turn 3. All my Dread Knights are gone. Usually Grey Knights players are like, oh shit, all my Dread Knights are gone. In my list, I'm like, who cares? Fuck Dread Knights. And now we are into my turn 3 where I got Established Locust and no prisoners. I was able to max no prisoners. I'm just popping up, killing everything with Purifiers. And then Established Locust I was able to get for 4, which must have been in his deployment zone. And I do remember I actually did this Established Locust with Interceptors, a squad of Interceptors that was able to deep strike in a very thin spot. He had his cultists on his home objective, and he had a lot of stuff kind of in the center. There was a space on the corner, essentially. I hope you guys can see my mouse, but right here in this little square right here, there was a space of 9 inches that was able to fit. I think it was a full 5 squad of Interceptors. So we got that Established Locust in his deployment zone right there, and we got no prisoners. Moving on to the next turn, he did get a 10 on primary here, and look, he actually beat me by primary total. He got the 10 on primary again, and then he got Extend Battle Lines and Established Locust in my deployment zone as well. So we both established Locust. He was on his home and 1 away. He was on 2 away at the start of his turn. And actually, he might have burned 1 here. He might have burned a main slam objective. I'm not sure. And then in my primary next turn, I only got the 5. I only held my home, essentially. Then going into my secondaries, I then got Area Denial. I kept him out of the center. And I actually, this Area Denial, I actually moved my Land Raider up. I was kind of low on units. I moved my Land Raider up to get that Area Denial in the center. So again, a late game Land Raider, if your opponent is not focusing on it, can do something like that. Can just move up and hold an objective, and maybe they were ignoring it because it's just it is just four last cannon shots. I think in this game it definitely killed a Rhino, and it probably did big damage to at least 1 War Dog, but it got me points here. Area Denial, and then Marked for Death. I think he had just like a few units left, and he had to pretty much mark everything, and I was able to get one. I don't remember what happened there. Then moving on to the final turn, we both burned each other's home objectives on this final turn, and then we both got 10 for being on objectives. Otherwise, again, I got to score at the end, so I got to burn his home and then get on 2 to get my 20. He had 20 from burning my home objective and being on 2 at the start of the turn, and then he was unable to do containment or overwhelming force at the end of the game, and I had overwhelming force and assassinate, and I actually wasn't able to do either with what I had left. I think at the end of the game he had just Fabius. He had a squad of 10 possessed on my home that he was actually able to rapid ingress in turn 3, but bring on off the board edge. So I kind of totally forgot about that. But anyway, at that point, I didn't have the assets to kill 10 possessed anyway. So if he had done that, I probably would have run away with whatever unit was guarding, And those possessed were moving 10. They had the +2 movement, and they had the +1 toughness, but they had the +2 movement. So he could have, if he had brought them in anywhere on my home side of the board edge, and I didn't really have the assets to screen it out, and by turn 3 probably, he would have been able to get that home objective by the end of the game. That was it, and then I won 89-87, so super tight game. Really came down to some secondaries he couldn't do, or even really it kind of came down to that Air Denial that he chose not to do at the beginning, and then neither of it, and then him not being able to contain or doing overwhelming force at the end. All right, moving down to game 2. 1 game down and 1 gear down. Let's get it. We did Mission In. It was the Ritual, which I've actually never had to play at a tournament before. The TO was cooking on this one. He's like, you guys are going to play the Ritual. It's a real mission. Here you go. Mission In is actually the only approved combination of rules that GW suggests for a tournament for the Ritual. So it was the Ritual. It was Swift Action, which is battle lines can advance and fall back into actions, which is good for the Ritual because you got to do the actions to build those objectives. And then we had the Deployment Crucible of Battle, so kind of like diagonals, big space in the middle. And of course, again, on layout 1. So in this game, I was playing the Necrons Obeisance Phalanx, which I actually didn't even know existed before this tournament. I've never seen one play it before. It's kind of a cool one. It's got some cool rules. It's basically a Necron's Oath of Moment, but it gives +1 to wound on a unit instead of full reroll hits. And then it had some fun gems in there, some good stratagems, and it had an enhancement where if the bearer of the enhancements unit killed a unit in melee, it actually stole a CP from me. So that was fun. It didn't happen in this game, but that is a fun kind of rule that I'd like to see more of, stealing CP from your opponent. Actually, it doesn't steal CP. I would lose one. He wouldn't gain it. I think he should gain it, but it's fun to fuck with your opponent like that. We go to the opponent's list. He was running Ematech the Stormlord, of course. He's great. Double CP guys are always good. He had the Overlord's Translocation Shroud with that enhancement I was talking about, the Honorable Combatant that can make your opponent lose a CP. Scorpic Lord, Silent King, 1x5 Morals with Tesla, one singular Canoptic Spider. And now when I saw this Spider, I was like, I'm in trouble because it's given out Feel No Pains against all of my shit. Then 2 Doomsday Arcs. Doomsday Arcs are great. You know, people are using them Star Shattered. They should probably be used in every Necron's list. 1x5 Flayed Ones for little infiltration poo, and then 2x10 Lich Guard. The Lich Guard, I'd love to see him back on the field. I haven't seen them in a minute. They're still really sturdy. They're still really tough. 1x6 Scorpion Destroyer, so he had a Max Scorpion Squad with the Scorpion Lord, and then he had a 2x5 Triarch Praetorians. They're another probably even less seen unit than the Lich Guard, but they're pretty cool. You know, they popped up. They did their little shooting. One of them made a 9-inch charge. It was pretty sweet. And one of them actually made an 11-inch charge because he's force shielding on it, and he rerolled it a 6 into an 11. So going on to the gameplay and how it went. So I did end up winning this game pretty handily, 85-66. I made some very big plays, like I was talking about earlier, with the alpha strikes and the smart saving and usage of stratagems to get that boom, boom, boom super combo going. I did on turn 2. He had positioned, and I'll go back to the terrain layout. So he had positioned and done. I went first, I think. Yeah, I went first. I made where you see this eye on the left here. I know you guys can't see my mouse. I'll have to figure that out later. But the left side eye, the like peekaboo, that's talking about terrain on the terrain map. I actually did a ritual where I popped it right there with an interceptor squad, and then I had scouted because I was going first. I had my second strike squad on the upper right corner outside of my home mount, ready to scout back if I went second, ready to scout forward if I went first. So I scouted them forward, then I moved them up, then I brought the interceptors over, and I forgot that I could advance do actions. I did advance them. I essentially advanced them up into that central L wall. And the way we were playing it, you know, on these maps, you see that the objective does go into the terrain a little bit. The way we were playing, the way TO had set terrain up, was that the terrain pieces were 100% off of the center objective. So you could not hug the center objective. You could not hug these walls and be on the center objective. So I was off the center objective on those L's, and then I actually popped a ritual in a way that had my interceptors and my strike squad on the new objective. So he would have had to remove both units for me to lose it. And if he didn't kill that strike squad, I was going to stinky my next turn. So that's kind of a big brain play there, and a way to utilize your scout move in a situation like this. I had I had assassination, which I didn't score obviously. And okay, so that's what I did. I established locus. I did advance that strike squad, but I established locus with them because they got within range of the center for baby stars for 2. And I ended up ditching assassination for a CP because, like I was mentioning earlier, this is a very CP hungry detachment. You want to be using a lot of the stratagems. Well, really, you only want to be using Sanctified Killzone as much as possible. You want to be using what I keep forgetting what's called Hallowed Beacon as much as possible, the 6-inch strike and charge. And then you want to be using Overwatch essentially with that Crow unit, and maybe with a Dread Knight if you need to. You don't really want to be using any of the D3 Mortal Wounds ones. They're kind of cute, but 1 CP even for D3 Mortal Wounds, it's not a good trade-off if it was guaranteed and you have to roll for it too. They're kind of shitty strategies, to be honest. But that's okay because Sanctified Killzone and Hallowed Beacon are so good, it doesn't really matter. And I bring that up because going into my turn 1 actually, no, my turn 2 because I went first. So I did set up that ritual. He set up a ritual kind of in the same way on his eye in the bottom right corner. And then he had his flayed ones infiltrate down there and set it up. But then he staged his Scorpex, or he moved his Scorpex out from his deployment zone and tried to get them all the way to the wall, but they didn't roll a good advance. So he had like 1 in the building and the rest kind of strung out to the top of the eye. And then his flayed ones were not that far in front of them. So I was able to pick up a Dread Knight, pick up a Crow's unit, and pick up the side cannon unit, dropped them all over there, dropped Crow's unit within 6 inches of the flayed ones, and all that shooting destroy the entire 6-man Scorpex unit. The Lord was left alive. I think I shot at something else that was back there too. And then I charged and killed the Flay ones, killing 2 of his units in 1 turn and flipping the objective he had just built, which then gave him 0 points on the ritual on primary in turn 2. So he was off to a rough start after that. Then also got Area Denial, that strike squad that I had positioned in the center. They stickied that ritual objective, and then they were able to walk into the middle. Or they didn't have to move. They just got me Area Denial for sitting there. And then Overwhelming Force, again, he had his flayed ones make that objective, and then there wasn't a screen in front of him. I was able to charge and kill those flayed ones. Moving into his next turn, he got Secure No Man's Land I think he took the objective in the middle from me. Yeah, he charged and killed that strike team, essentially. And I think he ended up having like 10 Lynch Guard there and the whatever the other ones are. What are they called? The motherfuckers with the spears. Triarch Praetorians in there as well. Going on to my turn 3, I got 5 points on primary, so I still think I held that sticky objective. But he had taken me off of he took me off of the objective that I had stolen over here. So in his turn 2, I had the 10 brick with Crow on the objective, and then a Dread Knight kind of behind the Grandmaster Nymph's Dread Knight kind of behind it, and then maybe even another 10 brick, maybe the side cannon 10 brick was over there as well. He brought forward the Silent King through the crack through the L shape, which a Land Raider can't fit through, but the Silent King can fit through. And then not a knock on him, I'm just saying a knock on, the Land Raider is too wide to fit through a gap, but every other vehicle is just like half an inch narrower, But anyway, the Silent King fit through the ruin. He had a Doomsday Arc shooting downwind, and then he brought forward some other stuff. He brought forward the Immortals, he brought forward the Lich Guard led by the guy that had the thing that was supposed to make me lose CP. They shoot to death. They did shoot, I remember what happened now. I had the melee Purifiers there. They shot the melee Purifiers down to 1 model, and then eventually he picked it off at a later time. But so they essentially killed all the melee Purifiers. They then charged Crow and his Purifier dude and killed everything except for 1 or 2 Purifiers and Crow himself. And then they flipped the objective with OC. So I only had 5 objectives. He's holding the objective on his eye icon. I'm holding sticky, the objective of my icon. And then you don't score for your home objectives in Ritual. Going on to and then he did, that was his turn 2. Going on to my turn 3, I scored 5 for that. I went ahead and built another objective kind of way, way over in the bottom right corner of the map because I didn't think he would be able to get to it, and that proved true for the rest of the game. I stuck there with it. I think it was the Inter-Squad Interceptors scoring that primary the rest of the game. I did that. I maxed no prisoners. I had a really, really good turn. I brought forward that Dread Knight. I probably then brought the side cannon Purifiers over there because it wasn't them over there before. Passed the battle shot test with Crow, fell back with Crow, shot to death all of those Lich Guard, and then did some other kills on some other areas of the board. I stormed hostile objective by taking that objective back, and then critically, because I took that objective back, and then he only held the center objective, that then gave him only 5 points on primary in his turn 4. He then got no prisoners for only 1 kill, and then he did get to cleanse the 1 objective that he controlled. He also built an objective after that, so he built an objective kind of 12 inches above the exact center objective and a little bit to the right, which he would then hold the rest of the game, but he was only able to score 1 time in the fifth for points. So he got baby cleanse, baby no prisoners, and then he built that next objective. Going to my turn 3, my turn 5, I at the start of this turn held the objective over here on the left still that I had originally built and stickied, the objective way in the bottom right, and by this point I also held the objective on his eye. And the way I did this was that he brought forward the Silent King. He killed some stuff with the Silent King, I forget what, but he multi-charged. I had Crow and 1 Purifier, and also a Grandmaster Nemesis Dread Knight. And the Nemesis Dread Knight was inside of the building footprint. So he charged the Silent King, and he had to charge into the building footprint. Silent King did to charge my Dread Knight. He has a kind of a mini whiff, or I roll hot on my involts, whatever it is, my Grandmaster Considerate Knight lives on 1 wound and then does 11 damage back to the Silent King, even with his -1 damage reduction. So that is, I think that might be the only time my Grandmaster Considerate Knight, either of them got into combat, but they can still punch hard into Big Boy. They can still punch hard, and that's why I'm still bringing it to him. So he did 11 damage to it. He wasn't dead. The Silent King, I think, had 3 wounds left. This actually would have been a good time to use that Crow stratagem where he can do morals at the end of the fight phase. I know I said that was a shitty stratagem before, but this might have been the time to use it. Let me see if I can remember what it's called. Into the fight phase, it is, and by remember I mean look at my phone, obviously, Flames of Sanctity. So that would have been a great time to use Flames of Sanctity, even though it only goes off on a 3+, even with Crow, and a 4+ without. So yeah, kind of a shitty stratagem. I ended up meeting anyway. At any rate, Silent King's down to 3 wounds. I'm at 1 wound, and I have Crow, and I have the OC on the objective going into my turn 4, turn 5, whenever that happened. The resolution of that ended up being, I stayed in combat with the Silent King. I shot the Silent King with the Dread Knight. He used -1 damage. Only 1 side cannon wound went through, but because he had charged in the footprint of the building, my Land Raider, which was over essentially in front of the bottom right portion of my home L, was able to snipe him over the top of the building, and 4 last cannons, 2 multi-meltas, twin-linked heavy bolter. I just shot the last cannons, and he took like 9 damage, so he went bye-bye there. And that was my objective for the rest of the game. And then, I scored 15 on a primary in turn 5. Got max containment, love to contain, and I got extended battle lines for 5 as well. He also ended up scoring 15 on primary in turn 5 because he went last, so he was able to hold the middle objective. He held that objective he had built in the top right, and he actually fell back with a Doomsday Arc onto the eye objective that I had stickied originally to take that for the end of the game from me. There was a fight on the left here I didn't talk about with Emotet the Stormlord and a bunch of Lich Guard that kind of put that my home eye in a precarious position, and that's why he was able to end up out OC me there, but not until turn 5. And that was, again, a victory, 85-66. Thoughts on this game? We don't see this attachment a lot in competitive play, and I think he played almost as good of a game as he could have played with the tools he allowed. The 2 big mistakes that I was able to exploit was, again, he in that turn 1 or I think my turn 2, he didn't screen me out behind his infantry keyword Scorpex, and I was able to eviscerate them with Crow's unit with a simple drop down, and then steal that objective with a simple 6-inch Deep Dragon charge. And those tricks are good for now, but it'll be just like Teleport Strike Force. Once people know the tricks of this attachment in the competitive scene, they'll be able to play against it better. So we'll have diminishing returns. Right now is a very good time to be popping around and doing these kind of Purifier alpha strikes. Moving on to game 3, the Guard Combined Regiment. Okay. So the Imperial Guard boys, we know about it. It's our worst matchup. The endless barrage, the endless armada of high toughness tanks that they can bring to bear against our poor brothers of Titan is just, historically and statistically way too much. We're running Take and Hold, which is not great for against this matchup in that we can't hold things and then not get shot off of them. So Take and Hold's a bad matchup. Guard at all is a bad matchup. Take and Hold is bad into Guard. Hammer and Anvil might be the worst deployment into Guard because it's the firing lanes right out of the gate. He's up in the top right of his L, right? He's coming out. He's got shooting all down the middle. He's got shooting across all 3 objectives from that one lane. So, what are you going to do? He's able to move out and get into every firing lane on the board in turn 1. And then on top of that, I did end up going second as well. Or I ended up going first as well, So playing Guard, Hammer and Anvil, Take and Hold, went first. And also I was playing against one of the best Guard players in the country, honestly. Expected that I might not win. I did try to psych myself out and have hyper confidence going into it, but I think I knew I was lying to myself. And honestly, I did not play a good game. I didn't play a good game. I'll go into how the game went, and then I'll go into what I would do next time with the same list like I was talking about earlier to do this better. But at any rate, the Guard list I was playing against was a combined regiment, so, he's not doing Bridgehead Strike, but he does have Gaunt's Ghost, Ursula Creed. He's doing the thing where Ursula just hangs in the back all game, and then +1 his APs on shit for free with a infantry squad with mortar. He's got 2 tank commanders with demo. He's got 3 Scion squads, command squads attached to only 5-man Scions. They were all starting reserves. So they were all just kind of dropping in and doing bombs with their little strike with sustained hits and re-rolling all hit rolls for fishing for lethals. Then Death Corps of Krieg, just one squad of unled 20. The Emperor's Squad, what I talked about earlier. 2 normal Lehman Russes that, their their output gets a lot better once they stack with the 2 Lehman Russ Exterminators right next to them. And then 2 Scout Sentinels with las cannons just to get the reroll 1 buffs. And of course, I lost this game 84-59, guys. That one kind of stung. That one was not the best performance. As you can see, I held my home objective the entire game 5 points at a time. I focused in turns 2 and 3 of taking him off of every No Man's Land objective he stepped on. So he was staying out of the middle turns 2 and 3. He was going onto the top light, and he was going onto the bottom with like heavy stuff behind, but with 1 tank at a time. I killed, I think, 2 Lehman Russes at the bottom. The top one, I just out-OC'd for a few turns, sacrificing like a strike squad and like an interceptor squad. But eventually, I'm doing that. I'm playing the entire board except for the middle, but I'm split out to both sides, both this top objective in the No Man's Land and the bottom objective in No Man's Land. He's got a shooting gallery. He's got units lined up behind the thing he's sticking out. He can play that game a lot better than us. The guard can throw forward a unit, you kill it, and then they nuke whatever you have, and that's a very much higher percentage of our army, even if it's a tank, than it is of their army. So that was not a winning strategy against the guard. And if you look at the score, by turn 4, I still just had my home objective, and then he had essentially killed most of my entire army by turn 4 and was able to max primary in turn 4 and turn 5. If you look at the secondary score, I only lost secondaries by 5 points. So really, I lost secondaries as well, but really I lost the primary game so severely that it wouldn't have mattered anyway. So going back into what I would have done differently, I won't talk about the secondaries this one because they don't really matter. I did get a bad draw turn 1, assassination or no prisoners, and I did not want to spin the CP to redraw, so that could have been, maybe I should spin that redraw. I also got desperate, I think, in turn 3, and I used freaking, what's it fucking called? Fires of Covenant. I used Fires of Covenant to do D3 mortal wounds to a tank, and then I overwatched the tank with the Crow Flamer squad. And at the time, I was like, well, what else am I going to use the CP on? And then now I'm like, you freaking idiot. You use that CP on grenades. You use that CP to discard your shitty secondaries in the first turn. You use that CP to, I don't know, anything but that. Literally anything but that. And also, after I overwatched that tank, he dropped his like scions from reserves all over the board, and they did a lot of damage, so I definitely should have saved it for that as well. Another big mistake I did in this game is I started both Nemesis Dread Knights on the board, which I have been doing all tournaments, so by this, it's game 3 of a one-day tournament. I was kind of a little brain dead. 3 deers beep, we were getting a little swifty, and we didn't think too much about this one. We weren't prepared mentally or physically for the challenge that lay ahead. And so going back, what would I have done? One thing is I would have definitely kept a Grandmaster Dread Knight in reserve and rapid ingressed him onto this eye on the left side, like, again, the eyeball. That way he is in the stage threat to charge onto that top objective or charge into that center objective. We essentially stayed out of that center objective, everyone did, until he took it in turn 4 after wiping my entire army. If he had been able to do that, I would have been able to. He only had 1 Lehman Russ and 1 Scout Sentinel on that top objective. I killed the Scout Sentinel, didn't commit enough over there to kill the Lehman Russ. I could have walked that, rapid ingressed that Dread Knight up there, walked it out, killed that Lehman Russ he had up there, and then he would have had to divert more from the other side of the board as well. Then at the bottom, so that's one thing I would have done. Secondly, I split my assets between that top objective and the bottom objective when I needed to just put all my cookies into one basket, because playing the 5 for everyone game it is the same as playing the 10 for everyone game, except for the fact that I'm not clearing out entirely any of the firing lanes, right? Against guard, what you need to do, you need to stack all of your assets to clear out in one turn, try to clear out entirely one of the firing lanes. So either pick this top lane here, clear out everything up here, or pick this bottom lane here, clear out everything here. Now, they'll still be able to move those tanks that from the other lane forward onto the center objective and then shoot you your stuff that's on that first objective, but then you've done enough damage to their army where their damage output is reduced. And then if you have that Dread Knight stage on this eyeball, he can come out and melee those tanks the very next turn if they do that. So the main thing that I want to do next time I play guard is 1, put one of the Grandmaster Dread Knights in reserves. 2, don't go for every objective. Just try to go for one no man's land objective and clear this top or this bottom fiery lane wherever they're soft, wherever they have the less units, and then potentially swing onto their home objective from there. So I think that's a better strategy than kind of the zero-sum game of I'm putting my units on 2 no man's land objectives. He's shooting me off of 2 no man's land objectives, then putting his units on. I'm charging him again, and then he does it again, and then I'm out of units and he's not, and he wins the game, which is what happened here. If we look at the board, turn 1, we're staging, we're doing whatever. Turn 2, I have 5 points. He's on some objectives. I throw assets out there. We have to get into melee. We have to be close to take him off, hit his tanks off those objectives. I do so. His turn 2, he shoots me off. He moves back on him. My turn 3, I get him off again. His turn 3, he shoots me off. My turn 4, I can't get him off. I have no more assets. So what we have to do is we have to power one side, only play on one half of the board, and then swing around. And I in part, I thought of this after talking to him and asking for his advice after the game. So he was a really cool guy, really nice dude. Kind of shared some insight with me about how I could play more strategically into Imperial Guard next time. So I'll give that a try in my next tournament. Overall, 2-1, not a bad start. Not a bad start to the season, boys. We are, of course, on an eternal crusade to win our first tournament. We've never won a tournament before. If I have to drive to the middle of nowhere, I will do it because Atlanta is a bloodbath. Either way, stay tuned with us. We've got the Drunk Vulture podcast number 2 covering all that good Slaneshi shit and also doing the Guard Codex review coming out next week. And we will have another tournament review after my next tournament, which will be in February at Warzone Atlanta, the biggest tournament in GT in Atlanta besides the World Championships itself, of course. I've been Grandmaster IPA, and this has been Drunk Bolt. Boom.